think as a way to welcome you, I want to raise a kind of mysterious question, which is, what is this human capacity for forgiveness? And what is the human capacity for dignity, no matter what the circumstances of life? One of the great messages, if you get nothing else today, is that the potential for the human heart to open, for compassion, connectedness, vision, wisdom, the sense of the sacred, love to grow in us is almost unbounded. And it's not, I use the word us quite deliberately, it's not limited to any particular person. It is there in us, and there are ways to do it. So let's talk about forgiveness for a while. And I'll do some teachings and some storytelling maybe for 40 minutes or so, and then we'll do 15 minutes of practice of training in forgiveness, and then some questions. The Buddhist texts begin in some of their opening lines with the phrase, "O nobly born," they're speaking to you, "O you who are the sons and daughters of the Buddhas, of the awakened ones, you who have this Buddha nature in your own heart, remember who you are. Remember the mystery of human consciousness taking incarnation in this body that you've been given." I mean, it is really mysterious. How did you get in there? Seriously. You know, you woke up one day and you were a baby, right? This is wild. It is. And a little bit of fur, or not very much in my case, the certain patches of it, some places a hole at one end into which we regularly stuff dead plants and animals, right, and glug them down through the tube. If you look in the mirror, you'll notice that you've aged, right? Right. We won't go. But the interesting thing is that you don't feel that old. You know that moment? And that's because it's only the body that's aged. And in the moment that you're looking at the mirror and noticing that it's droopier or losing its fur or whatever it happens to be doing, there's also a recognition that this body isn't really who you are. It's a part of us, and we live it and inhabit it. But there's a knowing, a consciousness that says, getting older, isn't it? And that part that knows, that part that is defined in Buddhist psychology as the knowing faculty of consciousness, exists outside of time. Time is the creation, or is the milieu of the body, which gets older in time. But consciousness actually lives in the reality of the present. And there's something so mysterious about knowing, if you're seeing me or hearing these words, or the capacity to see and know, as if we're in a movie theater. Here we are in a theater, and you're watching on the screen, and it might be a romantic comedy, or it might be an action movie, or a war movie, or some kind of a caper or a musical or whatever. And at some point, when you're really engaged in the movie, you remember, oh, this is a movie. You turn and you see the light from the projector, and you know about all the little film squares that the light's shining through, and you go, oh, here we are in the movie. Isn't this an amazing movie? There is something similar in the relationship of consciousness itself to all the kinds of experiences, joy and sorrow and sights and sounds and praise and blame and gain and loss. And some part of us knows this. And if you don't know it now, you'll know it just around the time when you die. And you say to yourself, wow, that was a trip, wasn't it, that life? You'll see, anyway. So forgiveness begins to speak to the question of identity, who we sense ourselves to be, and what it means to find the capacity to release or let go or move on, to be involved in the drama of our life, and in some way not completely lost or beholden to it. It speaks about a kind of inner freedom that is your birthright. So when Viktor Frankl walked out of the concentration camps and wrote, "We who lived through the concentration camps can remember those who walked through the huts, comforting others and giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but their very existence points to the last and greatest of all human freedoms, the freedom to choose your spirit no matter what the circumstance of life." And so we all go through joys and sorrows and difficulties and pleasures. And underneath this is the freedom to choose your spirit, as Nelson Mandela did after 27 years in Robben Island. Now, forgiveness is, in particular, the capacity to let go, to release the suffering, the sorrows, the burdens, the pains, and betrayals of the past, and instead to choose this mystery of love. And love is another thing nobody really understands, and no amount of fMRI studies, and this area of the brain lights up, when you love. It's like gravity. The physicists don't understand gravity. They have equations for it and so forth, and beautifully, but nobody knows what gravity is. It's just that force that pulls things back together, back to the big flash at the beginning. And love is the same. Brian Swimme calls it cosmic allurement. Maybe gravity and love are just different forms of the same energy of things feeling connected to one another no matter how distant they appear to be. And so forgiveness shifts us from the small, separate sense of ourself to a capacity to renew, to let go, to move on, to live in love. As the Bhagavad Gita says, if you want to see the brave, look to those who can return love for hatred. If you want to see the heroic, look to those who can forgive. With forgiveness, we're unwilling to attack or wish harm on anyone, including ourselves. And without forgiveness, life would be unbearable. It's hard to imagine a world without forgiveness, because we would be chained to the suffering of the past and have only to repeat it over and over again. There would be no release. So you have the Northern Irish Protestants and Catholics saying, well, in 1537, your people had yellow banners and marched through our neighborhood, and so we're not going to let you get away with that. Or the Bosnians and the Serbs and the Croats, all that fueled by modern radio, as you know, and all this demagoguery. Or the Hutus and the Tutsis, or in South Africa or Cambodia. Or the Palestinians and the Israelis. If there's no forgiveness, there is simply the chain, literal chain of suffering that repeats itself in conditioning from one generation to another, and that's all that we have. A kind of blind conditioning. So all of these countries, and I'll add the USA, in Langston Hughes's phrase, let America be America, the America she never was. All of these people, the Irish and the Rwandans and the Bosnians and Serbs and the Cambodians and the Americans and the Palestinians and Israelis, desperately, for their sake, for their children's sake, need to find a path to reconciliation. And it's not easy. Love and forgiveness is not for the faint-hearted, wrote Meher Baba. But somebody has to stand up and say, it stops with me. I will not pass on to my children this sorrow. Whether it's in Ireland or Israel or Rwanda, somebody has to say, I will accept the betrayal and the suffering. I will bear it, but I will not retaliate, and I will not pass this on to another generation, to endless generations of children and grandchildren. And James Baldwin explains it this way. He writes, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate and fears so stubbornly is that they sense that once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their own pain. You understand? It means that if you can't bear it yourself, you put it on the Tutsis or the Hutus or the Protestants or the Catholics or the Muslims, or the Latinos or the blacks or the Irish or whoever it is. You project your own pain on another group or another person. An endless ocean of suffering because we're not able to carry the measure of sorrows that's given to us as human beings. We don't know how. Forgiveness, then, is an honorable practice. I remember a woman coming in the midst of a terrible divorce, and unfortunately her ex-husband was a lawyer and a very good one. So he wangled most of the money and a lot of the time of custody for children, and she was just desperate and losing time with her children and all this money. And she struggled in all these ways, first to protect herself, but finally she came in to see me and she said, I am simply not going to bequeath to my children a legacy of hate. I will not do it. I will figure a way through this, and I will not hate him, the bastard. And I will not teach that to anyone else. Humor helps, actually, it does. Or the person who was betrayed by his brother when their father died, and the brother took a lot more of the money. Family things get that way, don't they? All you have to do is read Shakespeare if you've forgotten that. And finally he said, it's not worth it. It's not worth it to live day after day with hatred. Because for one thing, that person who betrayed you, they could be in Hawaii right now having a nice vacation, and you're there hating them. Who's suffering? Elie Wiesel, Nobel laureate, who writes, suffering confers neither privileges nor rights. It all depends on how you use it. If you use it to increase the anguish of yourself or others, you are degrading, even betraying it. And yet the day will come when we shall understand that suffering can also elevate human beings. God help us to bear our suffering well. And so I speak these words to speak to your own experience. All those hands went up about forgiving yourself or forgiving others, or romance or divorce or money or other forms of betrayal. The passage from the Buddha, which goes, and I'll leave it in the masculine, although often I make it multigender. Look how he abused me, she abused me, beat me, threw me down, or robbed me. Continue to perpetuate such thoughts, and you live in hatred. Look how he abused me, or beat me, or threw me down, or robbed me, betrayed me. Abandon such thoughts and live in love. You too shall pass away. Knowing this, how can you quarrel? What is the life that you would choose to live? So here's a little bit about the architecture of forgiveness as we sort of wend our way toward doing a practice of forgiveness. First, some basic understandings. Forgiveness does not mean that we condone what happened in the past. It's not forgive and forget. In fact, forgiveness might also include, quite understandably, the resolve to never let this happen again. I will do everything in my power to protect myself or protect others to make sure this doesn't happen again. And forgiveness doesn't mean you have to speak to or relate to a person who betrayed you necessarily. It's not about them. It doesn't condone it. It can stand up for justice and say no more. And it's not sentimental or quick. You can't paper things over, and smile and say, I forgive. It is a deep process of the heart. And in the process, you need to honor the betrayal of yourself or others, the grief, the anger, the hurt, the fear, and it can take a long time. Sometimes when you do forgiveness practice, you realize, I'm never going to forgive that person, and never takes a while. basically. You'll see. Or forgiving yourself, which in some cases can be equally long and difficult. This great forgivenesses of things that we've done or small ones, and the kind of epidemic of self-hatred and criticism in this country that I see all the time from people who come to meditate. This from Florida Scott Maxwell, the author. She writes, "No matter how old a mother is, she watches her middle-aged children for signs of improvement." Right? And there's some way in which we've internalized this, and we spend our life judging ourselves. And some of us are such harsh judges, they wouldn't hire you in a civilized society, if there is such a thing. You'd have to go work for Idi Amin in Uganda, and they'd say, yeah, right, put her on the bench, you know. She knows how to judge, right? So it's not sentimental. It's actually a deep work of the heart that purifies and releases and somehow permits us to love and be free. And sometimes it's a kind of tearing of the closeness of the heart. The Lakota Sioux, they say that grief, which is a part of the forgiveness, because it's all the loss that things didn't work out the way you wanted. Somebody said forgiveness means giving up all hope of a better past. Right? It's done. It's the way that it was. But with it, there's loss and there's grief. For the Lakota Sioux, grief was valued. It brought a person closer to the gods. For when a person had suffered great loss and was grieving, they were considered the most wakan, the most holy. And their prayers were believed to be especially powerful, and others would ask them to pray on their behalf. So sometimes it's the things that make us vulnerable, that tear the heart open, that actually bring us back most fully to what matters, to love, to life. That our vulnerability becomes a place that our hearts depend on for staying alive and open, even when we're hurt. Does this make sense to you? That we need to respect this. So forgiveness isn't sentimental, it's not quick, it can take a long time, it's not a papering over, it's not condoning. It's also not for anybody else. It's like the two ex-prisoners of war, one who says to the other, "Have you forgiven your captors yet?" And the second one says, "No, never." And the first one then looks and says, "Well, they still have you in prison then, don't they?" And I remember sitting with the Dalai Lama and some Tibetan nuns who'd gotten out of 7, 8, 9 years of imprisonment and torture, together with a meeting that I was running of ex-prisoners from prisons all across the USA who'd been using meditation, contemplative practices, mindfulness, compassion, and so forth to change their lives. And when they got out, this was a room, here's these guys, 25 years in Texas State Prison, 18 years in Ohio in a maximum security, just out. And these people sitting with the Dalai Lama and with these little nuns who were in prison when they were teenagers for saying their prayers out loud. And the nuns, somebody said, "Were you ever afraid?" And they said, "Oh yes, we were terribly afraid. And what we were afraid of is that we would end up hating our guards, that we would lose our compassion. That's the thing that we most feared." And they sat there, these sweet young nuns. And I remember this one guy who'd been in prison for, 18 years in Ohio saying, "I seen some brave folks in my day, and I ain't never seen anything like you young ladies." It was really amazing. Forgiveness isn't for the other. It's for us. It says, I will not put another human being out of my heart. For the sake of our own dignity and our own heart. I was riding on the train on the way to my father's memorial funeral service from Washington to Philadelphia. And I sat down next to an interesting fellow, an African-American guy, and we got into a conversation. He asked me what I did. I said, "Oh, I'm in theater." Now, sometimes I say I'm in sales. That's a different thing. But anyway, it turned out he'd been in the State Department in India for a while. exchange stories. But then he quit when he got fed up with some of the ways that the U.S. government was working in India at that time. And he now worked for an inner city project in Washington, D.C., and he worked with young boys, particularly those in jail and prison and those who had committed homicide. He worked with gang kids, too. So he told me a story. He said one young kid, 14 years old, trying to, be tough and be in a gang, the way that he proved himself and that you did in that gang was to go out and shoot somebody. Like, it's an initiation rite, like the young men of Africa used to go and shoot a lion. But here we have these people initiating themselves in the gangs on the streets because nobody is tending them, really. That's a whole other story about initiation in our culture. And he shot this kid that he didn't know. And how he was apprehended, brought into court, trial, and at the end of the trial, convicted. And the judge says that the jury comes back, you are convicted of this murder, of this innocent young man that you shot. And just before he's taken away in handcuffs, the mother of the boy who was shot stands up, looks him in the eye and says, "I'm going to kill you," and sits down. And then he's hauled off. So after being in prison for a year or so, that mother goes to visit him, and he's kind of frightened. And she said, "I just got to talk to you." And so they have a little bit of conversation, and she leaves him something. Say, "You got any money for anything, cigarettes, whatever?" She leaves him a little money. And she starts to visit him and try and understand this guy who shot her son. And she goes every few months, and then over the course of 3-4 years, she starts visiting him more regularly, talking to him. And when he's about to get out at age 17 or 18, she says, "Yeah, what are you going to do?" He said, "I got no idea. I got no family and nothing, don't know." She said, "Well, I got a friend who's got a little factory. Maybe I can help you get a job." So she arranges that with the parole officer. Says, "Where are you going to stay?" He said, "I don't know where I'm going to go." She said, "Well, I got a spare room. You can stay with me." So he comes, stays in the spare room, takes this job, and after about 6 months, she says, "I really need to talk to you. Come on in the living room," and sits down. "Sit down, let's talk." And she looks at him and says, "Remember that day in the court when you were convicted of murdering my son for no reason at all, to get into your gang? And I stood up and I said, 'I'm going to kill you.'" He said, "Yes, ma'am, I'll never forget that day." She looked back and she said, "Well, I have. You see, I didn't want a boy who could kill in cold blood like that to still continue to exist in this world. And so I set about visiting you and giving you presents and bringing you things and taking care of you. And now I let you come in my house, and I got you a job and a place to live, because I don't have anybody anymore. My son is gone, and he's the only person I was living with. I set about changing you, and you're not that same person anymore. But I don't have anybody, and I want to know if you'd stay here. I need a son, and I want to know if I could adopt you." And he said yes, and she did. So forgiveness isn't just for the other. It's really for the beauty of your soul. It's for your own capacity to fulfill your life. And it's a practice, or it's a training. All the modern neuroscience that Fred Luskin's doing and Richie Davidson, the studies of fMRIs and things, a lot of it is the validation of neuroplasticity, that our nervous system is always flexible and changing, even to the very end of life. And one of the interesting things about forgiveness is that you find it in all these different traditions. There are African indigenous practices of forgiveness, a beautiful one in the Babemba tribe I might describe. There's, of course, the Christian teachings of turning the other cheek and Jesus' teachings of forgiveness. There's the mercy of Allah. There's all the forgiveness in Islam and in Hinduism. The thing that makes Buddhism and Buddhist psychology, because Buddhism is more a science of mind than a religion, although it functions as a religion for some people, unique, is that it offers practices and trainings. It doesn't just say turn the other cheek or remember the mercy of Allah, but it offers 1,000 different trainings in mindfulness, in compassion, in forgiveness, in loving kindness, in compassion for those who are different than you, trainings in kindness for the body, trainings in wise speech and compassion in words, 1,000 trainings. And these systematic trainings are part of a lineage also that went through from Buddhist teachings of Ahimsa through Gandhi to Martin Luther King and Nelson Mandela that underlie a lot of the exemplars in modern times of compassion and forgiveness. And this uniqueness in Buddhist psychology, that it understands the power of training, also is the ancient understanding of neuroplasticity. The teaching in 3 words is not always so. Listen to this, not always so. Things are always changing. And so you start with a mindful presence. And when people will come and meditate, what happens is you sit quietly, and then you allow yourself to use the breath or body to come into the reality of the present. And then with that, you begin to notice what's there. And sometimes you notice the unfinished business of the heart. You're just sitting quietly. You notice the tensions you carry in the body, and those get released. You notice the unfinished business of the heart. This friend who died recently of cancer celebrates her meditation. She says, even though my days are short, I have so much gratitude for the meditation practice, not just the joy and ease it brought, but every fearful fantasy and every bored and restless sitting and every pain and ache I sat through was a training for kindness and compassion, for the muscle for bearing witness, for the freeing of my spirit that carries me even as I face my death. So you learn how to be present, and then you work with the practice of forgiveness, which we'll do. And when I first was taught it, it was like, do this a couple times a day for the next 6 months and let me know how it goes, which is basically do this 300 times. And sometimes you do it and you hate that person. You're saying, I'll never forgive this. I'm so pissed. I feel so betrayed. I'm never. And so what you learn in it is how much you're holding in the heart. Or sometimes you just weep and it feels like the ocean of tears and unbearable. And you do it over and over and over, and gradually a trust comes that through, like planting seeds and watering and tending, the plants don't grow all of a sudden, they're underground. But after a while they come, as the poet Pablo Neruda says, you can pick all the flowers, but you can't stop the spring. And when you water the seeds of love and forgiveness, then out of this, it starts to change you. Now, I could and probably should stop right here and go into the practice, but since it's Berkeley and Dacker said people want actionable items here, I'm going to give you another list. The Buddha was a list maker, the Eightfold Path, the 7 Factors of Enlightenment, the 52 Mental Factors, the 4 Noble Truths. I'm going to give you a list of 12 principles connected with the process of forgiveness, kind of quickly in 10 minutes, and then we'll do our practice, okay? Here are the principles. First, understanding what it is and what it's not. And that was a little bit of what I elucidated earlier, that it's not condoning, and it's not a papering over, and it's not for the other person, and so forth. So there's an education. Then the second is to sense the suffering in yourself of still holding on to this lack of forgiveness for yourself or another. And start to feel that it's not compassionate, that you have this great suffering. It's not in your best interest to keep running the thoughts and feeling the feelings and doing the scenario. So you actually sense the weight of not forgiving. Third, you reflect on the benefits of a loving heart. And there are literal trainings and reflections. Your dreams become sweeter. You waken more easily. Men and women will love you. Angels and devas will love you. If you lose things, they'll be returned, it says. I don't know, as you go and love. People will welcome you everywhere when you're forgiving and loving. Your thoughts become pleasant. Animals will sense this and love you. And elephants will bow as you go by, it says. I don't know, you can try it in the zoo, right? Your babies are happy in the womb and as you grow up. And you recite these things and you look at what are the benefits of a loving heart. That's 3. Number 4. You discover in the sense of identity that it is not necessary to be loyal to your suffering. This is a big one, ladies and gentlemen, that we're so loyal to our suffering. What happened to me? The trauma, the betrayal. I mean, okay, it happened. It was horrible, and you may need to do healing. But is that what defines you? Live in joy, says the Buddha. This is his instruction. Live in joy and love even among those who hate. Live in joy and health even among the afflicted. Live in joy and peace even among the troubled. These are instructions, and then he tells you how to do it. So you release, you look at the Dalai Lama, who has the weight of the oppression in Tibet and the loss of the culture, and yet he's also a very happy, joyful person. He said they've taken so much. They've destroyed temples, burned our texts, disrobed our monks and nuns, limited our culture and destroyed it in so many ways. Why should I also let them take my joy and peace of mind? It's there's an astonishing poem that maybe I'll read just a couple of lines of if I can find it here. Where is it? It's called A Brief for the Defense, for those of you who are lawyers, by Jack Gilbert. And I actually don't see it here. But the gist of the poem is somehow to say that if we do not allow our joy, in some way we collaborate with those who denigrate others, because the injustices of the world and the people who are suffering, they too want joy. They don't want the suffering, and somehow we diminish their suffering if we don't also allow for our joy. Or Albert Camus put it, he spoke of joy as being a moral obligation. He said, there's so much suffering in the world, yes, but if that's all that there was to humanity, it would be hopeless. Joy, too, is a moral obligation of humanity. So we understand that being loyal to your suffering is not who you are and not helpful. That's 4. 5, understanding that it's a process that you go through and you do forgiveness over and over and over again, and finally you get to some place where forgiveness is possible. A man wrote to the IRS, I haven't been able to sleep knowing that I cheated on my taxes. Since I failed to fully disclose my earnings last year on my return, I've enclosed a bank check for $2,000. If I still can't sleep, I'll send the rest. That's how it works, step by step, right? It's a training, it's a process, layer by layer. That's how the psyche and the body work. 6, you have to set your intention. And there's a whole complex and profound teaching in Buddhist psychology about the power of both short-term and long-term intention. But when you set your intention, it sets the compass of your heart and your psyche in a direction, and then you meet all the obstacles, and you can, by having that intention, you can work, those obstacles become workable because you know where you're going. Whether it's in a business or a relationship or a love affair or a creative activity or in the work of the heart, to set the intention is really important and powerful. 7, you then need to learn the inner and outer forms of forgiveness. And we'll do an inner practice shortly of these 3 directions of forgiveness. And the Buddhist world is full of outer forms of the practice of pavarana and certain kinds of confession and making amends and so forth. All these that are part of it, that not only do you need to know that it is a practice, but you actually learn the practices. and forms. And there's ritual outer forms and then inner practices. 8, inner technology requires that you start the easiest way. For these kind of practices, not for mindfulness training where you start where you are, but with love and compassion and forgiveness, the inner technology is you start with whatever opens your heart. And maybe it's your dog, and maybe it's the Dalai Lama, and maybe it's, your child, or the thing the person that you most love and most easily can forgive. And when that's open, then you bring in neutral, somebody that's a little more difficult. And only when the heart's way open do you then say, all right, let me take something difficult. And what happens is you take the thing that's difficult and your heart closes and shrivels and says, I hate them, I'm never going to forgive them. And then you sit there with the suffering of that. There you are with your heart open and gushy and loving your dog and your child and your partner and all those things. And then your heart turns into this walnut. It's really hard. And you go, oh, well, I'm never going to love that person, but this is too painful. Okay, I'll forgive you just a little bit, because the technology itself, step by step, begins to teach you what it means to live with an open heart. So you start with what's easy. That's 8. 9, you must be willing to grieve. And grief has, as Elizabeth Kubler-Ross spelled out, bargaining. I wish it didn't happen. Is there some other way? Why didn't I? Loss, fear, anger. And the poet Rumi says, don't reject your grief and loneliness. Let it season you like few ingredients can. So there comes a kind of trust, and I see it when I work with people over weeks and months and years, that things that are difficult become digested and workable and transformed in us. So you have to be willing to go through the process in some honorable way, as I'm sure Nelson Mandela did. He describes it. He was outraged and angry and hurt and grieving and all the things that anyone would feel. 9, be willing to grieve and let go. 10, forgiveness includes all the dimensions of our life, the foundations of mindfulness. Some of the trauma is held in the body, and there's all kinds of trauma practice that you can do to release what's carried in the body. Eduardo Galeano says, science says the body is a machine. The church says the body is sin. The marketplace says the body is good business. The body says, I am a fiesta. And we get locked, whether it's the church or science or things like that. We get all this stuff actually locked in our body, and there's a very good science about about working with trauma. That's a part of forgiveness for some of us. And if you want to read Peter Levine's Waking the Tiger, or the somatic experience is a very intelligent approach to bodily held trauma, fight, flight, and freeze, and how it gets released. Forgiveness is work of the body. It's work of the emotions, where you work with the unfinished business, and you start to feel that the capacity for your tears and your joy grows as you listen deeply. And that you allow yourself to have all these feelings, and in doing so, the space of awareness that can hold them all becomes more and more trustworthy. And it works in the mind, the third foundation of mindfulness, because you see all the stories, and you're loyal to your stories, but the fact is that most of your stories are reruns. It's like you're stuck in a hotel room at 2 a.m, and you can't change the channel, and you're on one of those kind of shopping rerun channels, and it's just blaring, only it's your own mind, right? And 98% of the thoughts you have today are the same thoughts you had yesterday. There are very few new ones, actually, if you look closely. So in the mind, there are trainings in Buddhism for both the abandonment and the replacement of thoughts, skillful replacement of thoughts. As Abraham Lincoln said, I have always found that mercy bears richer fruits than strict justice. Think of this. And so you start to see the thought structure and discover you can change it. And then the fourth is the relational aspect, that we need help from one another. And it's a collective process as well. Annie Lamott, my friend, writes, she says, "My mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone." You know? And in some way to come and practice together is to realize that you're not the only one raising your hand saying you need to forgive yourself. Turns out that almost everybody else in the room raises their hand too. And that we, Nelson Mandela and Aung San Suu Kyi, and the people sitting near you are all part of the, if we speak of interpersonal neurobiology, of the field of forgiveness. The last two, I'm going on, is the shift of identity. And this is a poem I will read from Juan Ramon Jimenez. He writes, "Yo no soy yo, I am not I. I am this one walking beside me whom I do not see, whom at times I manage to visit and at other times I forget. The one who remains silent when I talk, the one who forgives sweet when I hate, the one who takes a walk when I am indoors, and the one who will remain standing when I die." There is in us an undying capacity for love and freedom that is untouched by what happens to you. And to come back to this, to know this true nature, original mind, Buddha nature, the shift of identity, O nobly born, is what is the invitation of the work of forgiveness. And Buddhist teachings are full of these people, mass murderers like Milarepa and Angulimala, who go through a transformation and are forgiven. So if they can be forgiven, even you, my dear friends, might be a possibility. And then the last is perspective. And in the Buddhist tradition, they talk about 100,000 mahakalpas of practice of forgiveness. A mountain as high as Mount Everest, and every 100 years, a bird comes along with a silk scarf in its beak and drags it across the top of the mountain, wearing it away a tiny bit. When that mountain is worn down, that's one mahakalpa. 100,000 of those of practicing forgiveness, you'll get it down. Or as the Ojibwe say, "Sometimes I go about pitying myself when all the while I'm being carried by great winds across the sky." And we're in this drama of incarnation and life that is so much bigger than our little stories. And when we can open this perspective, all kinds of ways to do it in this vast way, it's not just you who are hurt, but it's the hurt of humanity. It's not just you who are betrayed. It's the hurt of love, of relationship. Everybody who loves is hurt in some way. Everybody who enters the marketplace gets betrayed. You know, it's the loss is not just your pain, it's the pain of being alive. And then you feel connected with everyone in this vastness. So the last thing is a brief story, and then we'll do our practice, and time will be what it is. We'll be a little bit late. I trained and lived with Mahagosananda, who was the Gandhi of Cambodia, a very dear friend, good friend of the Dalai Lamas and others. And he led peace marches through Cambodia for 15 years, through the minefields. He would walk people back to their villages who wanted to return, chanting loving kindness and forgiveness the whole way. Through the jungles, people would shoot at them, and he would have hundreds of people behind him and be beating a drum or ringing a bell and singing the song of loving kindness. He said, if we can chant loving kindness the 100 miles back to your village, you will be safe. And he did it over and over and over again. Amazing person, nominated for the Nobel Prize 3 or 4 different times. Anyway, I worked with him in the refugee camp on the border of Cambodia in the early years of that genocide. And this was a camp, Sakeo, Kawi Dung. This one had 50,000 people in this horrible, hot, dry rice plain, surrounded by barbed wire, UNHCR running this camp, all these tiny little huts. And it was the camp that had the most Khmer Rouge in it, underground. Anyway, my teacher, Gosananda, asked, could we build a Buddhist temple in the central square, just a simple bamboo roof and platform? And the UN said, okay. So we got materials together and built this temple, and then invited everyone to come. And the Khmer Rouge underground said, if anybody goes to this temple, when we get back in Cambodia, which is only 10 miles back across the border, when we get out of here, you will be shot. So we didn't know if anybody would come. He went around the camp and rang the bell that morning, as you would the temple bell. And 25,000 people gathered, filled this square. And Bosananda got up on this little platform, this monk. Most of the monks were killed. 19 of the 20 people in his family were killed. 95% of the monks in the country were executed. All the intellectuals were killed. He got up. They hadn't seen a monk in 10 years. And he looked out at this sea, and I wondered what he would say to the faces of people. It was a grandmother and one grandchild who'd survived, an uncle and his 2 nieces, and that was all that was left. Temples burned, schools, villages, people killed. And the faces of trauma and shock and loss. What do you say? And he began to chant in Cambodian and Sanskrit this simple chant that's one of the first verses from the Buddhist teachings that goes, hatred never ceases by hatred, but by love alone is healed. And he chanted it over and over. Hatred never ends by hatred, but by love alone is healed, over and over and over. And slowly the voices began to pick up and chant with him. And pretty soon 25,000 people were singing this and weeping because it had been 10 years since they'd heard the Dharma, the truth, the law, the way. Hatred never ends by hatred. And what I saw is that he spoke a truth that was even bigger than their sufferings, even bigger than their sorrows. This is the ancient and eternal law. So put your papers down. Sit for a moment. And let your eyes close gently, and we'll do one of the forgiveness trainings in 3 directions. So first, with your eyes closed, just bring your attention here to the reality of the present. Feel your body on this morning, spring morning in May 2010. Here you are in this auditorium, Zellerbach. Let the shoulders drop, the eyes and face be soft. Let the breath breathe easily, and trust yourself seated on this earth. You are seated on under your own tree of enlightenment. You are the Buddha seated here learning the great art of forgiveness. And then the first of these 3 directions, and don't worry, this is also written out so you can practice this easily afterward. There's a handout for you of this. Here's the reflection. Follow along with your eyes closed. There are many ways in which I have hurt and harmed others, knowingly and unknowingly, betrayed them, abandoned them, caused them pain so many times. I remember these now and feel the sorrows I still carry. And let yourself remember the ways you've betrayed, abandoned, harmed others. And feel what you still carry. And in the many ways that I have hurt or harmed you, betrayed others, caused you suffering, out of my own fear and confusion, out of my own pain and anger and hurt and misunderstanding. In this moment, I ask your forgiveness. I ask your forgiveness. Please forgive me. May I be forgiven. And as you remember and ask, feel the movement of the heart that's willing to ask forgiveness and perhaps to receive it. Even as we do this practice, the tears and the regret, all of those things may come. Now include yourself in the second direction, just as I have caused pain and hurt, suffering to others. So too, I've hurt myself, betrayed myself, abandoned my own deepest values and love. Just as I've hurt or harmed others, so too I've judged and betrayed myself in so many ways. I remember these now too. And let yourself feel all the ways that you have caused suffering to yourself, to your body and mind and heart, as you've caused sorrow to others. I remember these now too. And feel the sorrows you carry from this. And now, again, breathing gently, the same practice of forgiveness in the second direction. Just as I have hurt or betrayed or harmed others, so I have done so to myself. Betrayed and harmed myself, caused myself suffering in body or mind. So many ways, out of my own confusion and fear, out of my pain and frustration and hurt. And in this moment, I offer myself forgiveness. I hold myself with mercy and tender forgiveness for my own humanity, for all the ways that I may have hurt and messed up and caused pain. Breathe gently just now. I forgive myself. I forgive myself. And feel what it's like. The image from the Buddha is a mother holding her most beloved only child. To hold yourself with a tender compassion and forgiveness. All these ways, I hold myself with forgiveness and mercy. I forgive myself. And then finally, the third direction. There are many ways in which others have hurt and harmed me. We have all been betrayed. We've all had suffering and pain visited on us by others. Every one of us has been hurt. I remember these now too, the ways I've been abandoned, betrayed, hurt by others, and feel the sorrows I still carry. And let yourself feel and sense. And in the many ways that others have hurt me, betrayed, abandoned me, caused me pain, I remember now. To the extent that I'm ready, and this is a process that can't be hurried, to the extent that I'm ready, I turn my heart in the direction of forgiveness. To the extent that I am ready, I forgive you. I offer you forgiveness. I release you. I will not carry the pain of hating you in my heart. To the extent that I'm ready, I forgive you. And let yourself feel either the lightening of the heart in the forgiveness or the understanding that you're not yet ready to forgive. And so you know the work of the heart that is ahead of you. And keeping in mind these three directions, let yourself come back to this room and your eyes open.